We are talking about the 10 Commandments and what they could possibly say to our lives today. And I'm here with Corinne, and we are into our second conversation about the 10 Commandments, Corinne. And I want to ask you the first question. What are you learning, and how are you finding this journey through the 10 Commandments?
Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I haven't actually thought about the 10 Commandments in depth, probably since Sunday school growing up. And, you know, when you think about them, you kind of think, yeah, tick that off, I'm pretty good. You know, it's not too bad. But the more that we've unpacked it, the more you realise that there's actually a lot to it, and there's a lot you can get out of it. Particularly this week, when we're talking about idols.
This is turning into a confessional already, Corinne. This is fantastic. All right, well, we're going after two big questions.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today, and what's the first commandment that we're going to unpack today?
Yeah. So why do good things never really satisfy? That's the first one. And the second one is, why do bad things happen in the name of God? I think these are two really key questions.
That's just two really light questions to go after. And I think those questions matter because, we're living in a culture that has got more stuff, more prosperity than probably any other culture in history. And yet it seems like more dissatisfaction as well. So what's going on with that? Why do good things not satisfy? And bad things happening under the banner of God's name, that's huge. And so we're talking about two things that are big questions, I think really relevant to the human experience. And do you want to read for us the second commandment?
Yeah, because when you first hear it, we shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above, or on the earth beneath, or in the waters below. So essentially that's talking about idols, which in this day and age, I mean, we don't have golden calves, generally, I don't. But my first I remember as a girl thinking about like when Australian Idol started, and I was like, is this bad?
Well, Christians were torn, weren't they? Because in Australia, all the Christians wanted Guy Sebastian to win, but we
I certainly voted for him.
Yeah, secretly, hoping that we weren't breaching a second commandment by, supporting an idol. Was that something that there was an inner turmoil there for you?
Yeah, definitely in my sort of immaturity of the word idol, thinking like, what is this? But when I heard the message yesterday, I found it really challenging in terms of what it actually means.
Well, I think many people would assume in a Western culture that is essentially a post-religious culture that we are not idol worshippers.
Right.
But the word religion, it literally comes from the same Latin word that we get the word ligament. Now, you know about this. You've just busted a ligament in your knee.
You just saw me internally respond then when you use the word.
Yeah. She's still got a reaction, Corinne, because she's just popped a ligament in her knee. But what a ligament does, and you could probably explain this better than me at the moment, is what a ligament does is it's that connective tissue that binds and ties together.
And it's pretty painful when it isn't connected or when it's not doing its job.
Right. You notice the ligament when it ain't working.
When the kneecap pops out, for sure. Yeah.
That's going to be a whole other podcast, just your kneecap experience. And so, whether or not a person is part of a faith community, whether or not a person reads a sacred text, whether or not a person prays, every single person has some central piece to their life.
Right.
Everyone has some ligament that is holding their life together, their identity, their hopes, their dreams, their meaning, their fulfillment, their definitions of what is good, what is bad. And so even the most apparently, supposedly irreligious person, by definition, actually is religious, because all of us have something that is functioning like a god, something that is our functional religion, the ligament holding our lives together. And so I think when we understand religion in that light, it makes this commandment much more relevant.
Yeah. Because
as you said earlier, you don't have any statues of Buddha in your garden.
No, I don't. Yeah.
We will be sending a team around to check. But all of us do have something that is functionally acting like God.
Yeah.
In our life. The message that Pastor Andre preached on this commandment as part of our series really talked about the fact that when people stop worshipping God, it's not that they stop worshipping. They still worship. but they worship something else. When they stop believing in God, they'll believe in anything else. Harold Best is an author. He's got a book called Unceasing Worship. And he makes this point. He says that all of us, whether we are Christian or not, are always worshipping, whether or not that worship is directed toward God. Right. There's a G.K. Chesterton quote we were talking about.
Yeah, and he was saying that when people stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, but they believe in anything.
Absolutely. And you look at the world around us today, just look at the media, look at social media. People are avid, devout worshippers.
Yeah. And everyone wants a cause. You know?
Everyone wants a cause. So whether they're worshipping money, whether they're worshipping consumerism, which
Kmart.
is Kmart, again, confessional, whether they're worshipping environmentalism, again, Pastor Andre unpacked all these isms that people worship in place of God. And this is not a new idea. This is actually exactly what St. Paul said happens to us human creatures. In Romans 1:25, Paul writes that meaning us humans, they traded the truth about God for a lie. So they worshipped and served the things God created instead of the Creator himself. So Paul makes the point that beneath all of our misdirected worship, there is a lie that someone has swallowed.
Right.
So we believe a lie, and then when we believe the lie, we start to worship the wrong things. And we worship created things instead of the Creator God. And so some of the things that people worship are like romance and sex is one of the biggest gods in our culture. Money, materialism, fitness has become like a god or a religion. The environment, like the environmentalism. Now, we should steward our creation.
Yeah.
Right? Like none of us want the planet to
disappear.
It'd be really inconvenient, to use Al Gore's terminology. We should steward the environment well. God has charged us to steward his environment well. The environment is a good thing. But it's reaching this point where it's got like a religious zeal about it.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe some people will be logging off this podcast now as we talk about it because it's a sensitive topic. But you've got your prophets like Al Gore and Greta are like prophets of the religion of environmentalism, big polluters of the devil. And it's like salvation by recycling, right? Like every time you take your recyclable bag to Coles or to the supermarket, you're doing your part.
Yeah.
Again, creation, the environment is a good thing, but we've turned it into a God thing. And people
when it's more important than God.
Yeah, it's becoming like the central cause of people's life. Sport. So in Australia, last week was the State of Origin decider. Shout out to all the New South Wales supporters who are still crying.
Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. But imagine you were like an alien visiting Earth from another planet, right? And you drop into a State of Origin game. You would think that you've dropped in on a religious gathering.
Yeah.
Right? You've got tens of thousands of people who have gotten a second mortgage in order to procure a ticket to the game. They've got all of their kids in the clothes with the names of their favourite, gods on the back, and they're shouting, they're sacrificing money, time, energy, they're passionate, they're enthusiastic. If their God wins, then they're happy. If their God, loses, then it's like you've walked into a religious service, but with people much more generous and passionate than most churches I walk into.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember doing a school assignment on why, sport is the new religion, and you've pretty much just outlined my entire essay. But I remember, I think it was Martin Luther had a good point. And he was saying we only break the rest of the commandments after we've broken the first two. I thought that was a pretty good point.
Martin Luther makes a brilliant point. So he says that really all of our sin and everything that God forbids in the following commandments is really because we've misdirected our worship. So he's making the point that all sin is a worship issue, which is what Paul says in Romans chapter 1. And so he says, we only break the Sabbath when we've started to worship our job or worship money, and so we won't take a day off. It's a worship issue. You only commit adultery when you've started to worship sex. And again, like we said earlier, before worship is misdirected, someone has believed a lie.
Yeah.
Right? So someone has believed the lie that if I get enough money or if I get that promotion, then I will be happy then I will have peace, then I'll have joy, then I'll be saved from my current plight and delivered into a heavenly bliss. We may not use those ideas, but that's the thought process behind it. No one commits adultery unless they've first believed the lie. Right? That sleeping with that other person will deliver them from their current plight and bring them joy, satisfaction, peace, happiness, all the things that God promised to give us. You only steal when you've first believed the lie that possession will deliver you happiness and joy. You only lie when you're worshipping your reputation. So I think Luther's insight is really fascinating about the human condition. We are worshippers. We believe promises. We think that certain things are going to be our salvation. And so we put them as central in our life. And it really betrays the fact that we're worshippers. We're all worshippers. And the Bible would use the language, we're idolaters. It's like one of the primary sins of the people of Israel in the Old Testament was idolatry. And yet we skip over it because we're like, not us. Well, no, actually is us. It's just we don't worship the Baal and the Ashtoreth like they did. We've got a whole other pantheon of gods that we worship.
I guess it begs the question though, like, you know, you're passionate about sport or you're really passionate about the environment and those things are fine, but what's the yardstick? How do you know, the line between passion and suddenly I'm worshipping it or it's my God, my idol?
Good question. Notice how I used rugby as the example before, because if I used AFL, I would have been too convicted. I think we know something has gone from a good thing to a God thing when we start to think thoughts like, if I don't get that, I'll be nothing. My life will be nothing. I'll be miserable. When we start to make something the locus of our identity, our hope, our joy, our peace. This is, to use a Bible example, to me, one of the most seemingly shocking stories of the Old Testament is where God asks Abraham to offer up his son Isaac.
I can't even comprehend.
There's a whole, we've preached a whole sermon about it in Calvary. In our It's All About Jesus series. We'll throw a link in the notes so people can watch that because it is a troubling story for a lot of people. But it's a strange story because God gave Isaac to Abraham. Right. So Isaac was a gift from God.
Right.
And yet God asks Abraham if he's willing to part with Isaac.
That gift.
Part with that gift. And it was a test of Abraham's faith. You see, what can happen is God gives us a good thing, but then it becomes the central thing in our life that we pin all of our hopes and dreams on and our identity around. And Abraham passed the test because in laying down in being willing to part with Isaac, he was proving that Isaac is a good thing, but is not the God thing in my life. And, we can put, what God was doing then is God was actually liberating Abraham from idolatry, but God was also saving Isaac, right? Because who wants to live with the crushing expectation of being God for someone else, right? So we're kind of getting way off our show plan here, but let's go. Some people, if you worship marriage or you worship romance, to be single is your functional hell. To get hooked up with that guy or girl is your functional heaven.
Okay.
So you'll make whatever sacrifices you need to make because you've believed the lie that this will deliver you joy, peace, happiness, identity. You'll be someone But the problem is, God help your spouse, because now your spouse is trying to fill the role of God. You've put this crushing weight of expectation on your husband or your wife.
They're doomed to fail.
Right. Who can live up to that? And so what God was doing is God was actually helping Isaac by dislodging Isaac from the place of God or the central piece in Abraham's life, displacing him, because no one, no child, no spouse, no job can ever be God for us. And so really, this second commandment is about getting worship in right order in our life. And I've observed that when we worship God and we make him central to our life, then we're free to enjoy all the other good things in life. We can enjoy sport, we can enjoy finance, we can enjoy marriage, we can enjoy family. We can enjoy them, but we're not worshiping them. And so as long as we know what is God and what is good, what are the good things God has given us to freely enjoy? Okay, let's enjoy them, but let's not worship them.
Yeah.
Let's get our hope, identity, purpose, meaning, all of that from God. And that then frees me to just get on it and enjoy the other things in life without making them core and central.
Yeah, getting that balance right. I mean, let's also talk about the third commandment, which speaks to probably one of the most complaints people have of God and religion.
Yeah.
Why do bad things happen in the name of God?
Why do you ask all the big questions, Corinne? Why do bad things... There'd be a lot of people listening or watching this who have either themselves personally or they know someone that they love who has had a bad experience under the banner of religion or under the banner of God. Maybe it was a religious school. Maybe it was a church experience. Or you scan history.
Yeah.
You scan history and you see the Holy Crusades.
Lots of people point to history.
Yeah. You see imperialism, often done under the name of, furthering the mission of Christ. You see in South Africa, in America, in nations around the world, racial segregation, apartheid, some horrific regimes and policy, which was sometimes justified by attaching scripture or God to it.
Yeah.
Even Nazi Germany invoked God's name to try to justify some of their horrific agenda. And so, no doubt through history, people have used the name of God to justify their own greed, ambition, selfishness, etc.
Yeah.
What I find interesting is sometimes people think, well, it's the atheists, it's the people who are hostile towards religion who like to point out religious hypocrisy.
Yeah.
But God was the first one to point out religious hypocrisy.
Right.
Right there in the third commandment, God is saying, I don't want a world where people are invoking my name to justify their own greed and selfishness and ambition and agenda. God saw that that was a possibility, and God was the first to critique religious hypocrisy.
Yeah, and that would make sense because, God was the first to command against religious hypocrisy. That's purely because evil done in his name hurts people that he desperately loves.
And it's a misrepresentation of his character. Right. If people were getting around, the city and saying that, Corinne told me to do this, Corinne told me to do that, and you had never asked them to do it, you'd be ticked off. You'd want to find those people and be like, "Oi, close your mouth. Stop using my name to justify," because Corinne, your name opens a lot of doors around here. And so that's why God is so strong against religious hypocrisy.
Yeah.
And it's worth saying as well for anyone watching this, for anyone listening to this, maybe you yourself or people that you love have been hurt by people under the name of God. The third commandment would say God is grieved by that. God never wanted a world where people would be hurt or harmed in his name because that would be a complete misrepresentation of the character of God. I think really this is where focusing our idea of God on the person of Jesus as revealed in the Gospels, the biographical accounts of Jesus' life, I think this is where this is so important.
Yeah.
Because as you read the Gospels, yes, people have got legitimate hang-ups with many of the things that have happened in history under the name of God. Totally understand that.
Yeah.
God himself has got hang-ups about that.
About it, yeah.
But as I open Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the four biographical accounts of Jesus' life, I never see Jesus manipulating.
No.
I never see Jesus exploiting. I never see Jesus driving his own agenda.
In fact, his response is always surprising.
Right. In what ways?
Well, just the way, you'd think that the woman who was caught in adultery, comes to her with open arms. And you see that time and time again. You think that he would shun people, but instead it was, he'd go after people who were greedy instead. And I don't mean go after, but in terms of, his holy anger.
He critiqued them.
Yeah. When he tossed the tables in the temple. So I think I'm always surprised with Jesus' response and how warm and gracious he's been throughout
100%.
the Bible.
Well, it's like what God was saying in the third commandment, Jesus embodied. So God in the third commandment gives a strong rebuke or critique of religious hypocrisy, and Jesus does the same thing. Like Jesus' strongest words were against people using God's name to drive their own agenda.
Right.
And so, I think if we want to realign, correct our picture of God can't be shaped by what we've seen some Christians do throughout history. By the way, it's also worth noting that Christians have done a lot of good in the name of Jesus as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes only one side.
It just doesn't make as good of a headline.
It doesn't make a great headline. You've got a journalism background, you know that. But, hospitals were invented by Christians. Orphanages by Christians. The Braille system so that the blind could read, invented by a priest.
And the government relies so much on NGOs, and a lot of them are Christian-based.
Yes, absolutely. Hospitals, schools, so much. So, absolutely worth noting that as well. We've just got to make sure that our picture of what God is like is centered on Jesus. And Jesus not only revealed God's name, he revealed God. He said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And the crescendo of the Gospels is Jesus upon a cross, dying for his enemies, laying down his life in loving sacrificial service for others. Like, I could worship a God like that. And so, again, for anyone listening to this or watching this at a later time who has been hurt by someone under the name of God, let's just say it one more time. Those people have used the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
And that's what God is against. If you've never read a Bible, open it up, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, these biographies of Jesus' life. And the picture of Jesus is so compelling that it really does correct our lens so that we can see God as he has revealed himself.
Because again, I like how you pointed out that in the message, I think it was part 4, that using the Lord's name in vain, so many of us think, oh, well, that's just using the Lord's name as a cuss word or a swear word, as opposed to actually, no, we can dishonor God by the things we say and the things we do.
Yeah. What I'm really enjoying about this series as well, and I say that not as a compliment to myself, but in studying and preparing this series, what I'm enjoying is the more you dig into and peel back the layers of these 10 commandments, the more we see that they speak directly to the hopes, the dreams, the fears, the concerns of the human heart.
Which is actually incredible that it's timeless. Something carved in stone 3,500 or so years ago is still so relevant to today.
Yes. So I guess to wrap it all up, you started with 2 big questions. Why do good things never really satisfy? Because we were created for more than good things.
Right.
We were created to enjoy good things, but to worship God. And when we get that order right, life starts to make sense. And then why do bad things happen under the name of God? Well, because people are fallen. People are imperfect. People have agendas. And often we name drop God's name or we co-opt the name of God to push our own agenda. But when we see Jesus who revealed the name of God, the nature of God, it really does, it's a compelling picture.
Thanks so much for unpacking all of that for us again, Dustin. And if you have any questions or you want to revisit these messages, they're available on YouTube and our podcast.
Thanks, Greg.